जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिविराजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस ऐसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी शिल प्रभुपाद की जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिविराजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की नमाचार्य हरिदास ठाकुर की प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसति गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की नवद्वीप मायापुर धाम की जगन्नाथपुरी क्षेत्र की गंगा माई यमुना माई की भक्ति देवी तुलसी महारानी की समवेत भक्त वृंद की गौर प्रेमानंदे all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी. So today we are reading from Canto number 3, chapter 21, verse number 24. न वै जातु मृषैव स्यात् न वै जातु मृषैव स्यात् न वै जातु मृषैव स्यात् प्रजादक्षा मद अर्हनम प्रजादक्षा मद अर्हनम प्रजादक्षा मद अर्हनम भवद्विदेश्व अतिरताम भवद्विदेश्व अतिरताम भवद्विदेश्व अतिता. It's actually atitaram. Yeah. Bhavadvideshva atitaram Mayi sangabhritatmanam Mayi sangabhritatmanam Mayi sangabhritatmanam Na vai jatum rishaiva syat Prajadaksha madarhanam भवद्विदेश्व अतितरारम मयि संगर्भितात्मनाम. Navaya jatum rishayvasya yadyakshamat arhanam jatitaram maye sange vritatma Navaya jatum rishayvasyat arhanam avadvideshvatitaram maye sanga vritatmanam Mataji. Prajadaksha Vidarshanam Bhavadvideshvati Taram Mayi Sangivritatmanam Nave Jatum Rishaivasya Prajadaksha Madarhanam Bhavadvidveshvati Taram Mayi Sangi Vritatmanam Navai Jatu Mrishaivasya Prajadaksha Madarhanam Bhavadvideshvati Taram Mayi Sangi Vritatmanam Navai Jatu Mrishaivasya Prajadaksha Madarhanam Bhavadvideshvati Taram Mayi Sangra Vitatmanam Na not Vai indeed Jatu ever Mrisha useless Eva only Syat it may be Praja of the living entities Adyaksha O leader Madarhanam worship of me Bhavadvideshu unto persons like you Atitaram entirely Mayi on me Sangrabhita are fixed Atmanam of those whose minds. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Translation. The Lord continued, My dear Rishi, O leader of the living entities, for those who serve me in devotion by worshipping me, especially persons like you who have given up everything unto me, there is never any question of frustration. Purport. Even if he has some desires, one engaged in the service of the Lord is never frustrated. Those engaged in His service are called Sakama and Akama. Those who approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead with desires for material enjoyment are called Sakama, and those devotees who have no material desires for sense gratification but serve the Supreme Lord out of spontaneous love for Him are called Akama. Someone worships the Supreme Lord because of bodily or mental distress. Some else worships the Supreme Lord because he is in need of money. Someone else worships the Lord out of inquisitiveness to know Him as He is. And someone wants to know the Lord as philosopher can know Him. By the research work of His wisdom, there is no frustration for any of these four classes of men. Each is endowed with the desired result of his worship. Thus ends the purport. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunimitam Ena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So welcome everyone for today's Srimad Bhagavatam class. So the topic, the name of the topic I have given is Desire and Liberation in Bhakti Yoga. That is I think that's the name I have given for today's discussion. The reason because in this pastime we can see that the Kardama Muni, he has a desire, correct? And at the same time, in the upcoming chapters, we will also see that he'll eventually also get liberated. So there are both the desire and liberation, and especially because Kardama Muni is a Bhakti Yogi, then we get to analyze how does desire and liberation fit into Bhakti Yoga, right? So in this today's class, we will see what desire means and can we give up the desire? And what is the eligibility which is required for the liberation? I mean, does it mean that you really need to give up the desire to be liberated, or what does it mean, or what is the eligibility which is required for liberation? And what happens to the desires when someone is liberated? I mean, all the desires going to disappear, or what's going to happen to all the desires in the heart? Okay, so before I discuss about the desires and liberation in Bhakti Yoga, first I would like to discuss about how this is understood in the yoga. The reason why I have selected yoga is because number one is yoga is actually, it's not a Purva Paksha to the Vedanta. It is actually, all the Vaishnava Acharyas, they agree to the principles of Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. Even Prabhupada in the 6th chapter, he kind of acknowledges it. And he doesn't refute them, but he kind of gives some clarifications to some commonly misunderstood sutras. But in general, all the Vedanta Acharyas, they all agree to the Vedanta Sutras. And if you see how the Yoga Sutras deal with the desire and liberation, there are many sutras, but for now, for discussion purpose, these 3 sutras kind of capture the entire essence of desire and liberation. The first thing is that the yoga means chitta vritti nirodha. That's how yoga is defined in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, correct? Yoga is stilling of the changing states of mind, and for that we need to control the impediments, or we need to avoid the impediments. What are those impediments? There are 5 impediments. Avidya ashmita raga dvesha binivesha kleshaha, means nescience, ego, desire, aversion and fear of death. So these are like the 5 obstacles in the path of yoga. And what happens when you avoid these obstacles? Then tadad drashtuhu swarupena avastitam, means when that is accomplished, the seer abides in his own true nature. So in the Yoga Sutras, the way it is understood, the desire and liberation is that number one has to give up all the desires. That is pretty straightforward. Like yoga means chitta vritti nirodha, means no more desires. You have to still your mind. I mean, chitta vritti means not just desires, but it means everything, like emotions, feelings, thoughts, everything that goes on into your mind, that you have to just completely still them or eradicate them. And the way desire is seen as, it's seen as an obstacle. It's like one of the kleshas in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. That's why it has to be eradicated altogether. And what happens when one that is accomplished? Then one is liberated. That's how it is. Like the yogi is established in his own true nature. That means he is liberated. Now let's see how in Bhakti Yoga this desire and liberation are understood. We all know this famous shloka, akama sarvakamo va moksha kama udaridi tivrena bhakti yogena yajante purusham param, means a person who has broader intelligence, whether he has full of material desires, without any material desires, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the personality of Godhead. So this is how the desire is addressed in the Bhakti Yoga. So now one may ask, so what does it mean? Does it mean that the desire is destroyed? I mean, okay, it talks about like, whatever desire you have to worship the Lord. But what happens to the desire? I mean, do you think that it's going to be destroyed? Or is it okay to keep the desire at the same time, worship the Lord? Okay, if you worship the Lord, then what happens? I mean, after worshipping the Lord, will the desire completely be removed altogether? Because, see, the reason why this question is raised is because when we accept the Yoga Sutras, there it is very clearly stated that it is Chitta Vritti Nirodha. In Chitta Vritti Nirodha, what happens is that it is like, it is like formatting your computer, right? When you format your computer, you lose all the files. There's nothing left there, right? So the same thing, like desires also. Okay, when you are a Bhakti yogi and you are accepting the Chitta Vritti Nirodha, and you are saying that everything is destroyed, that means that you have to accept that the desires are destroyed. So now, do you agree to this point, or you don't agree to this point? So now let's discuss those things. Okay, the first thing the Bhakti Yoga does is that it classifies desires. Patanjali doesn't classify desires. For him, desire is just one thing, and you have to eradicate that. But in the Bhakti Yoga, the first thing we say is that desire is of two types. And here we can see in one of the Prabhupada's purport, the gopis loved the Lord without any return, and that is a perfect exhibition of the akama spirit. The kama spirit, or the desire for one's own satisfaction, is fully exhibited in the material world, whereas the spirit of akama is fully exhibited in the spiritual world. So this is how, first of all, this is how we understand desire. Desire is two types. One is akama and sakama. I mean, kama and akama. Means kama basically means it's also desire, but it is for the self-interest. And akama, it's also desire, but it is not for your self-interest, but it is in the interest of Krishna, in serving the Lord Krishna. So this is the first step. And the process, interestingly, if you see the process, it is similar to the Yoga Sutras. The Lord Chaitanya says, Cheto Darpana Marjanam Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. Means the glory of the Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditioned life of repeated birth and death. So here also Lord Chaitanya says the same thing, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. It is exactly same like Yoga Sutras where he says Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Correct? The process is, the principle is almost the same. Now, again the question comes, so what happens to these desires? There are two questions here. First of all, okay, now you say that Cheto Darpana Marjanam, now what happens? Are all the desires vanished from the heart? That's the first question. And the second thing is, what is the eligibility for liberation? The eligibility for liberation for Yoga Sutras is very clear. You eradicate the desire, you are eligible for liberation. But however, as I explained before, there are two types of desires. One, you have a spiritual desire, and next you have a material desire. That is why in Lord Chaitanya, in the Shikshashtaka, in the 4th verse, he says, Mama Janmani Janmanishware Bhavatat Bhaktir Ahaituki Tvayi. Means, I only want your causeless devotional service birth after birth. So this is again a desire actually. But this is actually a spiritual desire. It is no longer a mundane material desire. So, in one of the Prabhupada says that the spiritual soul has spiritual activities and spiritual desires. To fulfill this spiritual desire, however, one must be free from all material desires. Desirelessness means freedom from material desires. That's how Prabhupada says. Basically, it means it's not that you become, all the desires are gone, the desires are still there, but it's just that the material desires are gone, but because you are a spirit soul, you still have the spiritual desires. Correct? So the desire is not completely eradicated. As this ignorance dissipates, mundane desires become insignificant. The desire remain, but they are no longer mundane. They become transcendental. In that state, one perceives Brahman, the spirit soul, and Supreme Lord as one. Okay, so that's how the desire is understood in Bhakti Yoga. Now let's move on to the liberation. For the liberation, I think this verse, kind of appropriately describes what is liberation in Bhakti Yoga. This is from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9. Shubha Ashubha Falair Evam Mokshasya Karma Bandhanaihi Sannyasa Yoga Yuktatna Vimukto Mam Upaishasi. In this way, you will be freed from bondage to work and its auspicious and inauspicious results. With your mind fixed on me in this principle of renunciation, you will be liberated and come to me. So this is where Krishna specifically talks about liberation, and I would like to bring some of the very interesting points which Prabhupada makes in the purport. In the purport, Prabhupada says that it is clearly mentioned here, Mam Upaishasi. He comes to me, back home, back to Godhead. And he further continues to say, there are 5 stages of liberation, and here it is specified that devotee who has always lived in his lifetime here under the direction of the Supreme Lord, as stated, has evolved to the point where he can, after quitting his body, go back to Godhead and engage directly in the association of the Supreme Lord. So here, there are 5 types of liberation. Again, for Patanjali, there is only one liberation, which is Kaivalya, which is basically an impersonal merging in the Brahman. But here in the Bhakti Yoga, we say that liberation is just not one type. There are 5 types of liberation. And when he's relieved from all his sinful or the sinful tendencies and all the material inclinations, and then one is getting liberated. So that's how the liberation is kind of understood in Bhakti Yoga. There are 5 types, it's just not one type. And as you all know, that Salokya, Shrashti, Sarupya, Samipya and Sayujya. So these are the 5 types of liberations, which means residing in the Vaikuntha planets, or having the same opulence as the Lord, same form as the Lord, or being a personal associate of the Lord, or merging in Brahman. So these are the 5 types of liberation. But however, there is one more type of liberation, which is the 6th type of liberation, that is called as Vimukti. Means the love of Godhead. So, see, this is only possible by the unalloyed bhakti, means Kevala bhakti, means unalloyed devotional service. This Vimukti is achieved, or the love of Godhead is achieved. Because generally, the thing is that whenever we use the word mukti, for a bhakti yogi, there's always something in the background which says that there is some self-interest, right? That's why mukti is kind of condemned in many, in many places. That is because in mukti, even though you are liberated, the problem with the mukti is that there is always some percentage of self-interest in it, correct? So that is why you have 5th, 6th type of mukti, which is vimukti. Basically here you have like zero self-interest, like you no longer want anything pleasure to yourself, including spiritual. It's all about Krishna, and pleasing Krishna. And this is discussed in the 10th canto, 9th chapter, 20th verse. What does this vimukti means? In the purport, Prabhupada says, the word vimukhi dhat is also significant. There are different types of liberation, such as Sayujya, Salokya, Sarupya, Shrashti and Samipya. But vimukti means special mukti. When after liberation one is situated on the platform of prema bhakti, one is said to have achieved vimukti, special mukti. Therefore, the word na is mentioned. That exalted platform of prema is described by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as premo pumarto mahan. And Mother Yashoda naturally acts in such an exalted position in loving affairs. She is therefore a Nitya Siddha devotee, an expansion of Krishna's Hladini potency. His potency to enjoy transcendental bliss through expansions who are special devotees. Such devotees are not sadhana siddha. So here, that's why here it explains what that vimukti means. What does it like, See, even vimukti is also a kind of mukti, but generally we don't like to use the word mukti because that kind of has a negative connotation in Bhakti Yoga. But still, because this kind of mukti, the vimukti, is the highest form of liberation where you don't even have any more self-interest, and that is on the platform of the exclusive love of Godhead. Now, a question may be arised then why do we have these 5 types of mukti? I mean, what does it exactly mean? And what is the eligibility to receive those mukti? Right? Patanjali is very clear. You remove the desire, you get the impersonal liberation. Then what about these 5 types of mukti, and why do they even exist in the first place? So generally, what happens is that even though we all know the definition of the pure devotion, which is anyavilabhishita shunyam, jnana karma, without the traces of karma and jnana, that is uttama bhakti. Now a question may be raised, okay, for one to get liberated, does it mean that he has to do pure devotion only, or is it okay to have some traces of karma and jnana and then still be liberated? What's the understanding? Generally, it's understood that you have to have pure devotion to be liberated, but actually, even when there is a traces of karma and jnana, you can still be liberated. So that is why, that is the first 5 types of mukti. That is a kind of liberation a person gets when the devotion, devotion is there, but there's still some traces of jnana and karma. That is called as mixed bhakti, or not the uttama bhakti. There is some self-interest in the devotee. Then that devotee basically gets these 5 types of liberation. But however, when someone is an unalloyed devotee who doesn't have even a single trace of karma and jnana, he gets this, the vimukti, which is the highest liberation, which is going back to Goloka. I mean, that is like Vaikuntha, and that is like Goloka. That's like a subtle difference over there. Because in all the top 5, there is some self-interest, and the highest self-interest is actually in the Sahaja Mukti. Because in Sahaja Mukti, it's basically merging in the Brahman. There is not even a service aspect over there. So that is actually of the highest self-interest, and the no self-interest is the Vimukti, which is the love of Godhead, which is in the last, the 6th type of Mukti here. That is why, sometimes we see these impersonalists, they want to actually merge into the Brahman, and they want to kind of dissolve their identity. But actually, according to this Bhagavatam, actually they have the highest identity, because they have the highest self-interest. And but the person who is in the love of Godhead, even though it looks like he has the highest personality, but actually he has the lowest self-interest, because he has completely given up all his desires to be dedicated to Krishna's pleasure. So this is explanation given by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in the Sadharada Varshini in the Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter. The result of bhakti mixed with the tinges of material desire is the attainment of those respective desires. Even if it is material desire, you will still get it. Since those desires are wholesome, the devotee enjoys them either in this planet or in the heavenly planets, and at the end he attains the Salokya Mukti. So here he is talking about the mixed bhakti, where a person is not on the pure devotional service. Like the other example is Dhruva Maharaj. Because what happens is that even though the desires are there, but because they are not like a mundane material desires, that kind of spiritualized, right? So those spiritualized desires, they are wholesome and they are not like destructive in nature. Like for example, let's say someone comes to you and makes a garland of stones, pebbles, and gives it to you and says that, can you put it on Krishna? What would you do? Right? You wouldn't put a garland of stones on Krishna, right? But let's say the same person take that small pebbles and put that in an oyster and makes pearls out of it and gives you a pearl garland. Will you put it on Krishna? Yeah, of course, not just on the neck, you will put it on the head, right? Because you spiritualized, even though that's kind of mundane desires, but they are kind of spiritualized. So in that way, those desires, even Krishna fulfills those desires because it doesn't affect the devotee, even though they are kind of material desires. So in this way, in the present purport, in the current translation, it says, the Lord said, my dear Rishi, O leader of living entities, for those who serve me in devotion by worshipping me, especially persons like you who have given up everything unto me, there is never any question of frustration. And in the purport, Prabhupada says that the Lord fulfills the desires. So both material and spiritual, that is why there is no frustration for a devotee, because the Lord kind of fulfills both. And that's why example of Kardama Muni, because he's a Sakama Bhakti Yogi, means he has a desire, but it is Sakama, means it's like wholesome desire. It is not some unwholesome desire. So that's the conclusion. So the conclusion is that the desires basically are not destroyed, but are spiritualized in Bhakti Yoga. And the desires mixed with karma and jnana are also liberated, but not given the highest type of liberation, which is the vimukti, but he gets one of the 5 types of mukti. And the Lord fulfills even the material desires, which are basically wholesome, before the devotee is liberated. And after leaving the body, one attains one of the types of liberation. But however, the pure devotees only aim for the priti or the love of God without any self-interest. Okay, so that concludes my class. Anyone else wants to make any points? Archita Prabhu. Mike. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And also, it seems you're making a distinction between the different types of liberations that bhakti yogis get. But Prabhupada said no. He said no. Whether it's sadhan siddha, kripa siddha, or nitya siddha, he says there's no difference. He said that, at least on one occasion that I can look up and give you the reference. Prabhupada said there's no distinction. Otherwise, you're making it sound like when somebody who fell into the material world and then by the bhakti yoga process goes back, they remain distinct. They remain somehow partially contaminated. They're not on the same level of... But Prabhupada said no. Sadhan siddha, kripa siddha, or nitya siddha. One siddha is siddha. He said that. It's just like that. Siddha is siddha. Perfect is perfect. Liberated is liberated. There's no distinction about what type of liberation whether you were always there and never fell, or you fell and came back by the sadhana process, or you fell and came back by kripa process even.
Yeah.
You weren't completely perfect in sadhana yoga, but by the mercy of a devotee of the Lord or the Lord himself, you became promoted back to the spiritual world. So Prabhupada stressed that siddha is siddha. There is no distinction. But your presentation makes it sound like those who are on that platform of vimukti are somehow eternally distinct from others who are not.
Okay, yeah. So it looks as if these first 5 types of liberation kind of contamination. I mean, it looks like as if like you're 99% okay, but 1% there is some contamination. It may sound like that, but that is not the case, because the thing is that, as I mentioned here, that desire, even if it is there, that's not a mundane desire, right? I mean, you still want to worship the Lord, but the thing is that you want to worship the Lord in a specific way, correct? Like you want to worship the Lord in the Vaikuntha with opulence, right? But however, in the Goloka, the devotees doesn't worship the Lord with the opulence. So in that way, actually this is further explained, those things in the Sadartha Varshini, where he says that how even in the, that is where that, then, okay, so then what is the point of even having these 5 types of liberation, correct? I mean, if there is no distinction between all the types of liberation, then it would be just one category. Then there wouldn't be any more difference, just like Patanjali, there's just one type of liberation. But here, because the devotee has a specific inclination, desires, but those desires are not mundane, they are spiritual. So that is why there are kind of different categories. That is how I understand, but if you can correct me if you, yeah.
Yeah, there's the verse in the 2nd canto, I believe it's the beginning of the 6th chapter. Nirodha shana shanam atmana sakshaktibi. Muktir hitvanyata rupam sarupena vyavasati. Mukti means when you give up the gross and subtle material bodies, what's left is the pure spirit soul. You can't be a partially contaminated spirit soul. Yeah. Every spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna, is completely pure. When we're in the material atmosphere, we're covered. But that covering can be removed. And once that covering is removed, gross and subtle, then what's left is the pure spirit soul. So there's no like partially contaminated souls in the spiritual world. Yeah. What there is variety. Yes. And that's discussed in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. It's not that somebody who's worshiping Lord Narayan in opulence is somehow contaminated. No. They're eternally happy in that position, and the Lord is happy with them. So that's perfection.
Yeah.
Those who are in Goloka are definitely different. That's the variety. Krishna's spiritual world and even the material world is full of variety. Yeah. But the varieties in the material world are all contaminated. The varieties in the spiritual world are all perfect. Again, it's not that somebody who's a coward boy in Goloka is somehow, or, no, it's the variety. It's a variety of perfection. And anybody in any position in the spiritual world is completely happy. So the person in worshiping Lord Narayan on a Vaikuntha planet is completely happy. They're not thinking that, if I could just become a coward boy and Goloka, I'd be happier. They're not thinking like that. They're completely happy.
Yeah.
That's stated in the Brihad Bhagavatam.
I agree with you. That's variety, but again, I'm not telling that it's a contaminant. It's a desire, but it's a spiritual desire. So it's no longer mundane. And all these different types just come from the different varieties. And in these varieties also there is a gradation, because that's why the Goloka is it's the topmost, and then Vaikuntha is a little below that. So that means that there is a difference, but it is not a mundane difference. So if that likes to clarify that. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah. Nirantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Jai.